All right, let's dive right in to the world of ESL today. We're going to be talking about the ups and downs, the what it takes to learn English as a second language.
Yeah, we've got a ton of research articles and personal stories to get through.
We do. We'll make sure to break it down, though, so you walk away ready to tackle this linguistic Everest.
It's interesting. There's this study out of the University of Nottingham
Oh, yeah.
that found a Fiennish correlation between reading volume and vocabulary size.
So it's not just about, like, reading more words. It's like you really understand the language.
Yeah, making those connections helps you really grasp the language.
So are there specific types of reading materials that'll help build vocabulary?
Definitely. Newspapers are fantastic. They expose you to so much vocabulary in a real-world context. And don't underestimate fiction.
Oh, novels.
Novels. They can immerse you in such rich language, and they're full of idioms and stuff that you don't normally find in textbooks.
It makes sense. It's like learning by osmosis. But what about active learning? I've heard a lot about flashcards. Are those still useful?
Oh, absolutely. Flashcards are a classic for a reason. They use something called spaced repetition, which is proven to help you retain information. And there are so many apps now
Oh, yeah.
that make it super convenient and fun.
Oh, cool. You can even make your own, right? Like with words you see out and about.
Totally, with words you see in your daily life.
Cool. But honestly, sometimes learning can feel like a chore.
It can.
Can we make vocabulary building more fun?
Absolutely. Word games, and not just for kids.
Oh, I see.
Scrabble, Words, they're amazing for expanding your vocab in a fun way. And there are tons of online word games, too.
Like it feels like a challenge, not a task, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered vocab. Now, what about pronunciation? English is tricky, right? All those sounds. How can we conquer this?
Yeah, it can be a real stumbling block for sure. The good news is there are some techniques that can really make a difference. It's like training your ear to hear the music of the language, its
Hmm.
rhythm and all its subtle nuances. And the best way to do that is through listening practice.
So just passively listening to English.
Well, it's a great start, but to really see progress, you need to be actively engaged. Podcasts are great for this.
Podcasts, yeah.
You can find podcasts on anything, and they often feature different accents too, which helps.
That's a good point because being exposed to accents can be tough.
It can be, but it's essential for navigating the real world.
That's true.
And another powerful technique is repetition.
Simple but effective.
It might sound simple, but repeating words and phrases out loud helps you internalize that correct pronunciation.
So you train your mouth muscles too.
You do? Tongue twisters can be a fun way to practice this.
Like she sells seashells by the seashore.
That's the one. It's not just a rhyme, it's a workout.
I love it. So we've covered listening, repetition, anything else we can do to really master those sounds.
There is. Diving into the world of phonetics can be a big help.
Phonetics.
It's like learning the building blocks of pronunciation, understanding how those sounds are formed. There are some really great online phonetic charts.
Like a map of English sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. But, even native speakers struggle with grammar, right? It's such a big, complex system. How can ESL learners even start to understand it all?
Yeah, it's a lot. Don't worry, you don't need to become a grammar guru overnight.
Right.
It's more about breaking it down step by step. Focus on one concept at a time.
Gotcha. Like building blocks.
Precisely. There are tons of resources that can help. Websites, workbooks, language apps even.
Ah, yeah.
Some people really enjoy the classic grammar exercises like fill in the blanks or sentence transformations.
That helps drill those rules into your brain.
It does. But for those who like a more interactive approach, language learning apps can be great.
Oh, yeah. I've seen ads for those.
They make it more fun and engaging, like having a tutor right there in your pocket.
Cool. But what about real human interaction? Is there a place for that in grammar learning?
Absolutely. Peer review can be super valuable.
Getting feedback from other people.
Exactly. Like finding a language exchange partner or joining an online forum, it allows you to get feedback on your speaking and writing, plus learn from others' mistakes.
So it's not just about the rules, but actually using them, getting feedback, and practicing.
Right. Which brings us to another super important thing. Confidence.
Oh, confidence, yeah. It's one thing to know the rules, but it's another to actually use the language.
It really is. It's like
Yeah.
learning to dance. You might know the steps, but it takes courage to actually get out there and move.
That's true. And for a lot of learners, that fear of making mistakes can be really scary.
Yeah.
Like all eyes are on them.
It can be. So creating a supportive environment is really important.
A supportive environment. Okay.
Think of it like this. Would you rather learn to dance in a really strict ballroom or a fun, relaxed studio where mistakes are okay?
The fun studio for sure.
Exactly. You want to create a safe space where it's okay to experiment. And that can be in a classroom or just in everyday life.
Gotcha. So like small group discussions can help with that.
Yeah, small groups can make it feel less intimidating, and positive reinforcement is key.
So celebrating those small successes.
Exactly. Every step forward deserves to be celebrated. And that positive feedback can help learners see themselves as, capable.
Awesome. Okay. So we've talked about vocab, pronunciation, grammar, and confidence,
Yeah.
all essential for mastering English, right?
Yeah.
But there's another layer, something that trips people up, understanding those nuances of English.
Oh, absolutely. All those idioms and slang expressions, they can really throw you off.
Yeah. It's like a secret code sometimes. You might know the individual words, but not the real meaning.
Exactly. And that's where immersion really comes in. Think about it. You wouldn't learn to surf from a textbook.
You got to get in the water.
Exactly. You need to experience the waves. It's the same with language.
So get out there and experience English in real life.
Yes. Talking with native speakers, watching movies, listening to music, that all helps.
Got it. And if I do come across a tricky idiom, what should I do? Just memorize it.
Well, memorization can help, but focus on the context. How is that phrase being used in real life?
Oh, I see. So it's not just what the words mean, but how they're used.
Exactly. It's like learning a new dance move. You need to practice it in different settings. And speaking of practice, that can be a big challenge for ESL learners, finding ways to practice outside of the classroom.
It is, especially if you don't live in an English-speaking country or don't interact with native speakers often. So what are some good solutions for that?
Well, there are language exchange programs
Yeah.
where you connect with a native English speaker who wants to learn your language.
A trade-off.
Exactly. You can help each other. And with technology these days, it's easier than ever to connect with people.
That's true.
There are online forums and communities for ESL learners. You can find practice partners, get feedback, connect with others.
A sense of community.
Exactly. But also, don't underestimate those local opportunities.
Local?
Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, there might be local groups, events, volunteer opportunities where you can use your English.
So think outside the box.
Yes, volunteering at a library, joining a book club, or even striking up a conversation at a coffee shop.
I love that. So many opportunities if you just keep an eye out. But let's be honest, some aspects of English can be intimidating, like understanding different accents and how fast people talk. Sometimes it feels like a whole new language.
It's true. English has so many different accents and speeds,
Mhm.
but don't worry, your brain is adaptable. You can train your ear to understand these differences. Think of it like learning a new musical instrument.
Okay.
At first, all the notes sound jumbled, but with practice, you begin to hear the melody.
So how do we go from being overwhelmed to enjoying the music?
Listening exercises are key. Podcasts are great for this. You can find podcasts with a variety of accents, from Irish to Canadian and everything in between.
Ah, I see.
And news broadcasts, too. They often feature speakers with different backgrounds.
Yeah, true. But what about dealing with fast talkers? Sometimes it's like they're speaking a different language.
Don't be afraid to politely ask them to slow down.
That's okay to do.
Of course. Communication is a two-way street. Most people are happy to adjust if it means being understood. And if you're watching a movie, use subtitles.
Ah, yeah.
It can be a huge help to connect the sounds with the written word. But at the end of the day, learning a language is a marathon. It takes time and motivation can go up and down. How do we keep that fire burning?
Right. Especially when you hit those roadblocks and it feels like you're not making progress. What are some good tips for staying motivated?
Well, first off, set achievable goals.
So not aiming for fluency overnight.
Right. Break down the learning process into smaller steps and celebrate those milestones.
So celebrate those small wins.
Exactly. And tracking your progress can be really helpful. Whether it's journaling or using a language learning app, actually seeing how far you've come can be a big motivator.
Like a visual reminder that you are improving.
Exactly. And don't forget to make it fun. Connect your hobbies and passions with your English learning.
Oh yeah, make those personal connections.
If you love music, try learning through song lyrics. If you're a foodie, watch cooking shows in English.
It doesn't have to be a chore, it can be an adventure.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, this has been great. So many good tips for tackling those common challenges in ESL.
It's about approaching learning with the right mindset and strategies.
And knowing you're not alone in this journey.
Absolutely. Every ESL learner faces similar obstacles, and there are tons of resources and support available to help you overcome those obstacles.
Yeah, that's a great point. So knowing that every language learner faces similar obstacles, how can you tune these challenges into opportunities for growth and connection? That's something to think about. We'll pick up this conversation in our next deep dive session.
Yeah, it's easy to feel like you're the only one struggling, but knowing others are going through the same thing can be a real boost.
Like we're all in this together,
Mhm.
right? You know, one of the sources we looked at actually compared mastering English grammar to climbing Mount Everest,
Oh, yeah, I remember that. They talked about how overwhelming all the grammar rules can feel.
especially if your native language is more
Oh,
straightforward.
it's like you're in this maze and you know there's a way out, but it feels impossible.
Totally.
But, you don't have to memorize every single grammar rule to speak English
Oh,
well.
that's good to hear.
Focus on the most essential ones, the ones you'll use every day.
So prioritize, like the high impact stuff.
Exactly. Remember, grammar is a tool for communication. It's not about being perfect.
It's about getting your message across. And speaking of getting your message across, remember those idiomatic expressions we talked about?
Oh, those? They can make English sound like a whole other language.
I know. One source told this funny story about a student who misunderstood the idiom kick the bucket.
Oh, no. What happened?
They thought it meant to actually kick a bucket.
Oh my gosh.
It's a good reminder of how important context is.
It really is. That's why immersion is so important. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more you pick up on those subtle meanings.
So it's about reading between the lines.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to laugh at yourself when you make mistakes. It makes learning more fun.
So true. It takes the pressure off. We talked about incorporating your interests into learning English too.
Right. When you're passionate about something, it makes learning feel less like a chore. There was an example of a student who loved cooking.
Oh yeah, what did they do?
They started watching cooking shows in English, following recipes, even explaining their cooking to English-speaking friends.
So cool. They found a way to make it part of their life.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be cooking, it can be anything.
Whatever you love.
Exactly. And finding opportunities to practice outside of class can be hard.
It can be, especially if you're not living in an English-speaking country.
Right. But there are more options than you might think.
Like what?
Language exchange programs, online forums, volunteer.
Getting out there and using your skills.
Yes. And don't forget about the digital world.
Ah.
Online platforms, virtual reality, even social media groups.
You can practice from anywhere.
Exactly. Speaking of practice, one of the sources talked about how important feedback is.
Oh, I remember that. Getting constructive criticism can be hard, but it helps you grow.
It does. It helps you figure out what you're good at and what you need to work on.
And finding the right person to give you feedback is key,
It is. You want someone who will be honest but also encouraging.
like a coach. And speaking of challenges, a lot of learners are scared of making mistakes.
It's totally natural to feel that way. But everyone makes mistakes, even native speakers.
One source had a great quote, "Mistakes are proof that you're trying."
I love that. It's about changing how you see mistakes.
They're not failures. They're part of learning.
Exactly. So let's recap what we've talked about. We've talked about focusing on the most important grammar, finding creative ways to practice, and not being afraid to make mistakes.
Lots of great strategies.
And remember, it's all about having the right mindset and finding the right support system. Speaking of support systems, one source talked about finding a language learning community.
Oh yeah, being around people who understand what you're going through can make a big difference.
It creates a space where you can share your struggles and celebrate your wins.
Like a cheer squad for your language journey.
Exactly. And sometimes support can come from unexpected places. One source talked about a student who found a language partner through gardening.
No way, really.
They joined a gardening club and met someone who was also learning English.
That's so cool. You never know where you'll find connection.
So if you're feeling alone, remember there are others out there.
Reach out and connect.
Exactly. And one of the sources had some great advice about staying motivated, which can be tough.
It can be. Some days you feel like you're making progress, and other days it's like you're stuck.
They talked about setting realistic goals, celebrating small wins, and making learning fun.
So enjoy the process, not just the destination.
Right. Progress isn't always a straight line. There will be ups and downs.
But you just got to keep going.
Exactly. Celebrate the small steps, and remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I like that. One source compared it to training for a marathon.
Oh, yeah. It takes dedication and a willingness to push yourself.
And there will be days when you don't feel like it.
But those are the days that make you stronger.
So don't give up.
Pace yourself, celebrate those milestones, and believe in yourself.
Awesome.
It's a journey, not a race, and we all learn at our own pace.
Exactly. And before we wrap up this part, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Mindset.
Our mindset is so important.
One source said, your mindset is the soil in which your language skills will grow.
I love that. If you have a positive mindset, your language skills will flourish.
But if you're negative and doubtful, it's harder to grow.
So true. Having a growth mindset is crucial. See challenges as opportunities.
And mistakes as stepping stones.
Mm-hmm.
One of those sources talked about their own struggles learning English.
Yeah, they talked about feeling frustrated and doubting themselves.
That's something we can all relate to.
But they eventually overcame those challenges by changing their mindset.
How do they do that?
They focused on their progress, even the small stuff. They found people who supported them, and they started seeing mistakes as chances to learn.
It's so inspiring. It shows that we all have the power to change our perspective. Sometimes we just need a little reminder to keep going.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay, but before we do, I want to leave you with something to think about.
What's that?
Believe in your ability to learn English. Never give up on your dream of fluency.
That's a great message. And remember, you are not alone. So many others have been in your shoes.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring the world of English. We'll pick up where we left off in our next deep dive. Until then, happy language learning.
You know, it really is incredible how powerful a positive mindset can be when you're learning a new language. Oh, absolutely. It's like, if you try to force a plant to grow in bad conditions, it's not going to do well. But if you give it what it needs, it'll thrive.
Yeah, I get that. It's the same with our brains. We need the right environment to really learn and grow.
That's so true. One of the sources we looked at actually talked about neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, that rings a bell.
It's basically the brain's ability to change and adapt. Like, even as adults, our brains are constantly rewiring themselves.
Based on what we experience, right?
Exactly. So the more we practice something new, like speaking English, the stronger those connections in our brain become, and it gets easier.
So it's literally like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why consistency is so important when you're learning a language. Even doing a little bit each day can make a huge difference over time.
It's like watering a plant little by little. Helps it grow.
A perfect analogy. And speaking of growth, remember when we talked about celebrating our progress?
Oh, yeah. Those little wins along the way can really keep you going.
One source even suggested keeping a language learning journal.
Like a diary.
Kind of. It's a place to write down all those milestones, no matter how small. It can be a real confidence booster to look back and see how far you've come.
Yeah, because sometimes it's hard to see the progress when you're in the thick of it.
Absolutely. And speaking of seeing progress, feedback is so crucial too.
It's true. Constructive criticism can be tough to hear sometimes, but it helps you get better.
It does. One of the sources recommended finding a language partner or a tutor who can give you honest feedback on what you're doing well and where you can improve.
Oh, so like a coach for your language skills.
Exactly. And while it's not always fun to hear about our weaknesses, it's super important for knowing what to focus on.
Makes sense. It's about growing and getting better.
Right. But remember, feedback isn't just about what you need to improve. It's also about celebrating what you're already good at.
Oh, good point. You got to find that balance. One of the sources talked about how important it is to practice all 4 language skills.
Oh, yeah. Reading, writing, listening, and speaking, right?
Yep. They said if you neglect even one of them, it can hold you back.
It's like a car. You need all 4 wheels working properly for it to run smoothly.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the idea of practicing all 4 skills at once, what should you do?
Start small. One of the sources suggested gradually increasing the difficulty as you get more comfortable.
So like maybe starting with simple kids' books before you jumped into a really complex novel.
Exactly. Or you could listen to podcasts where people speak clearly before trying to understand a super fast news broadcast.
Makes sense. Baby steps.
It's about finding that sweet spot where you're challenged but not completely overwhelmed. And remember, practice doesn't have to be boring.
We've talked about this before, right? Connecting your hobbies and passions with your English learning.
Yes. If you love music, Try listening to English songs and singing along. If you love to cook, watch cooking shows in English.
It's all about finding those fun ways to learn that don't feel like work.
You got it.
Yeah.
One of the sources really encourage people to embrace the whole journey of language learning, bumps and all.
Because it's not always easy, right? It can feel like a roller coaster sometimes.
But through all of those ups and downs, you're growing and learning and seeing the world in a new way.
That's what makes it all worthwhile. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought.
What's up?
Learning English is a journey, not a destination. Embrace those challenges, celebrate the wins, and never stop exploring.
I love that. And remember, you are not alone on this journey. There are so many people who've been where you are now.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep discovering the amazing world of English. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.